What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today we'll be finishing our preliminary overview and guides on rogues in the Shadowlands Pre Patch with one that has garnered a lot of attention due to its performance on the beta, Subtlety. You know, that third spec of rogue that a majority of people haven't touched in like 2 years? Yeah, that one. Well, it's back with a slew of changes that we'll be going over today, so let's get into it. As I've grown accustomed to mentioning early in these videos, this is all still really new and somewhat volatile information, as there has been some things I've simmed that literally change overnight in some cases. Due to this, it's always best to sim your own personal character because I've already seen many situations where things like stat weights, talents, and essences might vary a bit depending on your loadout. Most of the following information should give you a good idea of what has happened with our sneaky ninja boy spec though, as well as some insight into how it all works together on the pre-patch. Before we get started though, I wanted to give a shout out to my newest patron for the channel and member of the Super Shiba Squad tier, Sebastodon. Thank you so much for your generosity and deciding to help support the channel, my friend. I truly appreciate it and will do my best to continue improving the quality of the videos and channel to the best of my ability. Alright, so I've started segmenting the videos out, so you should be able to skip around to whatever section you want. I'll still put timestamps in the comment section just in case people don't notice this little mention though, so let's begin with the new things Subtlety has received. All 3 rogue specs have received Slice and Dice back as a maintenance upkeep finisher. This buff increases your attack speed by 50% while it's active. This is a very nice ability to bring to Subtlety, as it greatly increases the rate at which we gain free energy and combo points from shadow techniques. For those who don't quite know how Shadow Techniques works, it's a passive of ours that basically makes every 4th or 5th successful auto attack you make cause you to generate 8 energy and 1 combo point, so increasing our attack speed directly increases the speed we gain resources, making Slice and Dice a nice ability to have in our toolkit once again. Rupture has also returned as our damage over time finishing move. This is our only damage over time effect as Subtlety outside of Azerite Essences or trinkets and whatever, so this gives a little extra damage over time uptime when you're running around doing mechanics, and lets us get some extra damage in multi-target situations as long as the targets are going to live long enough for the ruptures to tick for their full duration. We've received a new talent on our level 15 row called Premeditation. This move has come back and left numerous times across the history of WoW and is now back again as a level 15 talent option. This makes it so that after entering stealth, your next Shadow Strike will grant up to 10 seconds of Slice and Dice, and will also generate 2 extra combo points if Slice and Dice is already active. This was a hotly debated talent on the beta, as for a while it did not work with Shadow Dance, and then when it did work with Shadow Dance, it was really bugged and able to trigger multiple times during Shadow Dance. This is now no longer the case, and simply works on the first Shadow Strike you use in Shadow Dance, as well as a Shadow Strike if used from regular stealth. Poisons have made a return to Subtlety as well. For lethal poisons, we have both instant poison and wound poison. Instant poison is a simple 30% chance to deal nature damage, whereas wound poison does a smaller amount of damage but applies a stacking debuff to your target. This debuff reduces the effective healing they will receive by 8% per stack, reaching a total of 24% at 3 stacks. We also have crippling poison as our currently only non-lethal poison in pre-patch, and this will give a 30% chance to slow targets hit by 50% for 12 seconds. For changed abilities, oh boy are there a lot. Subtlety definitely has had a lot of stuff going on since Battle for Azeroth began. Probably the biggest change to go over first is Find Weakness, which was previously a talent that made it so your Shadow Strikes and cheap shots applied an armor bypassing debuff, eponymously named Find Weakness. This is now a baseline and core debuff application we will now have as Subtlety Rogues, and causes all cheap shots and Shadow Strikes to apply a 30% armor bypass debuff for 18 seconds. On top of that, several of our other moves will apply a shorter duration version of Find Weakness. For the pre-patch, Backstab's critical hits from behind your target will apply a 6-second version of Find Weakness, and the Gloomblade talent will apply a 6-second version if you critically hit from any position at all. This is really important to remember, as for Backstab, it must be a critical hit from behind the target to apply the debuff. Shuriken Storm will eventually apply Find Weakness as well on critical hits, however in pre-patch it does not, just as a heads up. Shadow Dance is of course the entire point of being a Subtlety Rogue, as that's what allows us to use our stealth-based moves while in combat. This move has had a number of changes to it, so hopefully I didn't miss any. Shadow Dance baseline only has 1 charge, down from the 2 charges it had previously. It does last much longer now, being an 8-second long buff versus the old 5-second version. Lastly, it also had a damage bonus baked into it, so you'll deal 15% more damage while Shadow Dance is active. Shadow Blades has been removed from the GCD, which lets us macro it in with a bunch of our other moves off of the GCD if we so choose to, such as Symbols of Death and Shadow Dance, which is great for saving us extra key presses. Eviscerate has an added bonus that works with the new Find Weakness mechanic, in that if you use Eviscerate on a target with Find Weakness active on them, you'll deal an additional 50% of damage as shadow damage. Symbols of Death has a new added bonus to it for a rank 2 that is unlocked at level 43. It will now make your next combo point generator critically hit guaranteed, which is going to be very useful for AoE once Shuriken Storm can apply Find Weakness. For now though, it's just a nice little damage booster for Shadow Strike or Backstab, as you should always be lining it up with Symbols of Death with the Shadow Dance cast, so you should really be using it only on Shadow Strike. Enveloping Shadows has received a bit of a nerf. It now only gives half a second of cooldown reduction off of your Shadow Dances per combo point spent, where it used to give 1 full second per combo point spent. This was most likely done to offset the new damage boost window that Shadow Dance has, as well as its longer duration than before. Crimson Vial has received a bit of a nerf across all 3 specs of Rogue. It only heals 20% of your maximum health over 4 seconds, down from 30% health over 6 seconds. Target capping is a pretty common sight to see in Shadowlands, and it begins with pre-patch. Shuriken Storm will now hit only a maximum of 8 targets, and Secret Technique can only hit a maximum of 6. This isn't terribly surprising if you've been keeping up with the changes that a lot of classes have seen, but it's something that might take some time to get used to. I mentioned Poison's returning to Subtlety, but Shiv has returned to Subtlety and all 3 specs of Rogue as a baseline PvE move, no longer a PvP one. Shiv will do a minor amount of damage as well as generate 1 combo point on a 25-second cooldown. For Subtlety though, this will be used to imply an empowered version of your non-lethal poison. In the pre-patch, we only have Crippling Poison, so what this will do is if you use Shiv while Crippling Poison is your active non-lethal poison, you will apply a 70% movement speed slow for 5 seconds. Lastly, for removed abilities, or rather, removed ability. As you haven't heard me mention it yet, I can tell you now that the Nightblade finishing move has been removed from the Subtlety toolkit. This was done due to the addition of Rupture most likely, as both were damage over time finishers and the damage bonus modifier from Nightblade was instead baked into Shadow Dance, which is a much better place for it to be anyhow. With us getting Wound Poison back as well, they most likely didn't want something like stacking up 2 forms of healing reduction if it would let you stack them. I don't know if it would have or not. Oh well. So now we'll go over all of our talent options and what is currently looking pretty strong or situations they might be useful in. As I always mention, it's best to sim whatever talents you might be interested in, as some recommendations can and most likely will be changed based on your character's personal setup. For the level 15 talent row, Weapon Master is looking to be our best single target option, as it gives us free chances at backstabs and shadow strikes on our target, which means even more combo points and free damage, which is always good. Premeditation is simming a bit lower in single target in pre-patch currently, but it's a better option in multi-target situations since it means you'll be saving some GCDs you'd otherwise be using to maintain Slice and Dice. You'll also be casting less shadow strikes in general in AoE situations, so the extra procs from Weapon Master aren't quite as valuable. Lastly, Gloomblade is definitely the lowest DPS option of the 3, though it does give you the luxury of not having to be behind your target for Find Weakness to trigger. This is something you probably won't be seeing a lot of usage of in the pre-patch though, as you'll have a lot of Shadow Dance uptime, so you'll have more Shadow Strikes going out anyways, which apply a longer version of Find Weakness, so yeah. For the level 25 talent row, we'll most likely be seeing Night Stalker as the best option in basically all situations, mainly because we won't really have to worry about running out of energy that easily due to our potent Azerite traits and Azerite Essences like Memory of Lucid Dreams. This will result in a very simple, flat damage increase while Shadow Dance is up, which has a pretty high uptime. Subterfuge is a very mediocre talent in general due to Shadow Dance, though you might find it useful for leveling or something if Shadow Dance is on cooldown to allow for more Shadow Strike casts in between killing mobs since you can re-stealth. Shadow Focus is very excessive at the moment, again due to our exceptional energy regeneration with Lucid Dreams and all the Azerite traits that we can get for huge haste buffs, but this will change in the future once these borrowed powers are left behind. For the level 30 talent row, Deeper Stratagem is holding up as the best option in terms of raw damage output for both single target and AoE. Marked for Death, while an engaging playstyle, will most likely not be necessary due to the amount of combo points and energy we can go through as Subtlety in pre-patch, and the issue is further exacerbated if you were using Vigor. Vigor would offer the smoothest playstyle of the 3 due to the larger energy pool and more energy regeneration, but it is simming exceptionally lower than the other 2 options. It is a good talent option if you're getting used to the rotation for the first time, and again, it may sim more favorably depending on your gear and loadout, so be sure to check that. For the level 35 talent row, Soothing Darkness is a fantastic choice while leveling or doing solo content, as the amount of healing you can get from this is really high, especially since it works during Shadow Dance as well. Cheat Death is great for cheesing mechanics and in case you make a mistake and don't want to get completely owned by it. And Elusiveness is a great choice for those who would rather use the damage mitigation of Feint instead. For level 40, these options are all associated with crowd control utility bonuses. Shot in the Dark is pretty nice for open world content and leveling, since you'll be able to get more cheap shots for free, which is a nice bonus. Night Terrors would be pretty useful if not for the fact we also have Crippling Poison now, which can be applied from Shuriken Storm. There is a slight benefit to Night Terrors as it is a guaranteed slow, whereas Crippling Poison only has a 30% chance per hit to slow something. If you are running Night Terrors though, and Crippling Poison is on the target as well, it doesn't result in an 80% slow or anything cool like that. It just uses the 50% from Crippling Poison as the primary slow. Prey on the Weak can be useful in dungeons, though it would require working cheap shots into your rotation more often to help boost the damage of your group. In PvP, this would be a much more noticeable benefit, since the debuff stays on the target even if they break out of the stun. The level 45 talent row is unfortunately an uncontested contest in terms of raw performance. Enveloping Shadows is our go-to talent here for a couple reasons. Since Shadow Dance only has one charge now, this extra charge becomes very potent and allows us to pool charges to line up our cooldowns more consistently, which is something Subtlety is very good at doing. The extra cooldown reduction effect by spending combo points is also quite potent, even after the nerf. Alacrity, good old plain boring Alacrity, is just not that strong for Subtlety. It's a pretty boring talent in the first place, and Haste is not an exceptionally powerful stat for Subtlety anyhow. Lastly, Dark Shadow is simming as an exceptionally weak talent, even more so than Alacrity. Some people are really fond of the idea of stronger Shadow Dances that occur less often, and I do think that that should be a viable alternative to the current super Shadow Dance spammy sort of builds that we have now. Though it seems this talent would need to be buffed or changed a little bit for that to be viable. There of course might be edge situations where you are more likely to use the bursty damage, but in terms of total output, it doesn't look likely. Lastly, our level 50 row. This talent row always kinda confused me, as Master of Shadows feels very much like a single target only sort of talent, whereas Secret Technique and Shuriken Tornado seem and are more AoE oriented. Master of Shadows is the best choice in raw single target and honestly just smooths out the playstyle if you aren't a fan of using Secret Technique or Shuriken Tornado in AoE. Ironically, even in AoE it sims on par with Shuriken Tornado anyways. Secret Technique is our go-to option for AoE builds. Shuriken Tornado unfortunately isn't in the best of places right now, and is pretty average in AoE and not potent in single target either. For now, it'll probably be unused, but this can change very easily in the future, and I still recommend simming for any combinations you might be interested in. Okay, so let's go over our Azerite Armor traits. As I've mentioned in both Assassination and Outlaws videos already, a lot of the generic stat traits have become very potent. Heart of Darkness is the easiest one to stack, as every piece of Ny'alotha Azerite Armor has it, and so do pieces from Horrific Visions, though you can also use things from Mythic Dungeons like Clockwork Heart, Incite the Pack, Trade Winds, and Blightborn Infusion. You'll definitely want to sim what you have available to you and see what will give you the most improvement. For Subtlety-specific traits, the First Dance is a fantastic option to stack, and you want at least one of them for sure. Even though Haste may not sim as our top stat, this amount of Haste you get is really frickin' high, so it's a lot of free stats. You'll want to get one of the Inevitability traits as well, and this is due to the increased uptime you'll have with Symbols of Death due to spamming Shadow Strike or Backstab. Obviously, the less you're using Shadow Strike or Backstab, the less potent this Azerite trait is, but having one of them is a very, very strong recommendation. For the inner ring of Azerite traits, your minor ones, Overwhelming Power is still looking to be the strongest option, though if you don't have it, then something like Unstable Flames or Elemental Whirl would suffice, though you'll want to just double check and see what you have available. For Azerite Essences, it's again best to sim through your available options. World Vein Resonance is actually looking quite potent now that Agility is a highly valued stat again, and if you're in a raid group with numerous people running it, it'll perform even better. This essence comes from the island expeditions we were running forever ago. Condensed Life Force might be a viable option if you don't have World Vein Resonance, but that one came from the Eternal Palace raid, so you'd have a tricky time earning it if you didn't have it already, since it is kinda time-gated. Blood of the Enemy also simmed halfway decent for me, though that one is locked behind honor grinding in PvP, so it'll really just depend on what you have to work with. For minor essences, there are quite a few strong ones that you can use. Breath of the Dying is a simple, free DPS gain and comes from the patch 8.3 Visions of N'Zoth Assaults. Rank 3 is unlocked by being revered with the Ultima Cord. The Crucible of Flame is a very strong, free DPS proc as well, and is honestly the easiest one to get, since you just need to increase your Heart of Azeroth's power level to unlock the higher ranked versions of it. Memory of Lucid Dreams is an exceptionally strong minor essence, and gives a lot of fluidity to the rotation due to the free energy regen procs, as well as giving some good self-healing and a versatility buff. This is earned from leveling up your followers in Nazjatar by completing dailies. If you participate in rated PvP, then the rank 3 Conflict and Strife would be a great minor essence as well. It'll really just depend on what you have available to you, so do keep that in mind, as most of these essences do take a while to level up if you haven't earned them yet. So it might not be worth grinding them out just to use them for a couple weeks. Up next, we have our stat priorities as Subtlety. This can change based on the type of content you're in, your gear loadouts, talents, trinkets, etc. From my personal testing, at least for single target stuff, you'll be looking at Agility as by far your top stat overall, and then both Versatility and Crit as high secondary stats, followed by Mastery and then Haste. This can all change very quickly based on your Azerite Essences, Azerite traits, trinkets, talents, and all that stuff, though Haste is generally not necessary to wear at all, since we get so much from Overwhelming Power, minor traits, and the First Dance, and stuff like that. I have had times based on swapping things around where Mastery does sim higher than Verse and Crit, so again, just sim your own character just to make sure you're not going too far off the beaten path with the stat priorities. And lastly, some pointers and tips that I've learned as I've been plugging away as a sneaky ninja boy on the beta, PTR, and now on live with pre-patch. For those new to Subtlety, having moves that aren't on the global cooldown, or GCD, is probably a bit different and might take some getting used to. When moves aren't on the global cooldown, you can hit them all at the same time, as well as with a move that is on the global cooldown with a single button press known as a macro. Macros are exceptionally popular for a lot of things, though one you might want to keep on your bars as Subtlety would be something that casts Shadow Blades, Symbols of Death, Shadow Dance, and Shadow Strike. If you have all of these in a single macro, then you're literally hitting 4 moves at the same time within a single GCD, which is a huge improvement to your rotation, as you don't have to waste any of your uptime with damage boosting abilities being pressed individually, as you want to stack them up every time you can for the most effectiveness. I'll leave a macro that I use in the comments below. I would recommend having this macro as well as just regular Shadow Strike on your bars too, because if you use just this macro to spam cast Shadow Strike, you might accidentally use your second Shadow Dance too early, which may desynchronize it from your Symbols of Death casts, which you do not want to do. Speaking of Symbols of Death, since it's on a 30-second cooldown, you will want to make sure you are always going to have a charge of Shadow Dance available as soon as Symbols is going to come off cooldown, so there may be times where you don't use Shadow Dance right away. Every 4th cast of Symbols should line up with Shadow Blades again if you're using them as soon as they come off cooldown, which is the ideal way to use it. Vanish can be used to get an extra Shadow Strike in as well, which can be good to remember if you're having trouble keeping Find Weakness on a target, or if a new target shows up and you're out of Shadow Dance but you have Vanish off cooldown. This information is still subject to change as we sim and learn more about all the things that we've gone through with the pre-patch, with scaling and all that crazy stuff. But this should hopefully give you a pretty good idea of what's been going on with our sneaky boy spec that was kinda left on the back burner for most of Battle for Azeroth. I didn't really touch up on Subtlety's AoE potential because right now, without the Black Powder finisher that we'll get while we level through Shadowlands, it's not going to be super impressive. There will be even more changes as we move into Shadowlands and reach level 60, and I'll be sure to keep you folks up to date and informed as all these new game systems and abilities are added. If you ended up finding this video helpful, then any likes, comments, or new subscribers are all exceptionally kind things of you to do. If you're new around to my little corner of the YouTube universe, then I'd like to welcome you to come check out the rest of the channel. I do new uploads every week down a variety of content, with a plethora of rogue-specific things for all 3 specs. As always, a massive thank you to all of my regular viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, for helping make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.